Hey everyone, welcome to Blender Tutor. My name is Tom, and today we're going to be modeling and animating this 3D emoji. Let's get started. The first thing we'll be doing is downloading this reference image. There's this website, Emoji Island, that has free high-res downloads of pretty much all of the emojis right now. So I will have a link in the description for this, and we will go into our project and import that as a reference. So go to Image, Reference. Next thing we'll do is we'll take our cube, hit Control-2 to add a subdivision surface modifier. We could scale that up to roughly the size of our emoji. You could look in wireframe view also, and we could see that our emoji is not perfectly lined up, so I'm just gonna bring that down a little bit. And let's just rename our cube to Emoji, and with level 2 selected on the subdivision surface, let's just go ahead and apply that. Scale that up a little more, and then go into edit mode, and with everything selected, hit F3, type 2 sphere, and then just scale up. You could also go down here and make sure it's all the way at 1. That'll basically just round out our former cube even more. So now this is important to model this and make sure it stays in the shape of a sphere without like distorting it too much. What we're gonna do is we're gonna basically have a second sphere. So we'll duplicate our sphere right now, and let's just really quick rename that to shape sphere. And what we're gonna do is use the shrink wrap modifier to make sure as we are modeling that it still conforms to the shape of a sphere. With our shape sphere selected, let's go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier again, and this time let's go to level 3. And let's actually, I know it's getting a little complicated already, let's hide our emoji sphere real quick. Take our shape sphere and scale that up to make sure it lines up with our emoji. And if you want, you could even just, let's go ahead and apply that as well. And let's do a 2 sphere on this as well. And now that's all we had to do with that. So you could hit Alt-H to unhide our emoji sphere. And the next thing we're going to do is with our emoji sphere, let's add another subdivision surface. We'll leave it at like level 1 for now. And then let's add a shrink wrap modifier. And we're going to, as our target, we're going to select the shape sphere. And as you can see, that kind of like snapped our emoji sphere to the shape of the shape sphere, which is exactly what we want. There's a few other things we're going to do now. Let's turn on snapping and have it snap to faces. That way when we're in edit mode and we're moving things around, it will make sure it is snapping to the shape sphere. And then the last thing we're gonna do is with our emoji sphere selected, go to your object properties tab, go down to viewport display and turn on in front. That way you'll always be able to see your emoji sphere as we're editing it in front of everything else. That'll make it a lot easier to deal with. The last thing we're going to do before we start actually modeling is let's just rotate this so the mouth is pretty much symmetrical on both sides. Let's go ahead and select our emoji sphere, and we're going to do one more thing now. So in edit mode, we'll box select half of it, and you could go ahead and delete those vertices. And then the next thing we'll do is add in a mirror modifier, and you could drag that up to the top. And we could even shade smooth our emoji. Now let's just go into, with our shape sphere selected to make it a little more visible for us, go into the object properties panel and go down to viewport display and display as bounds. That way it won't be so messy when we're looking at things in wireframe view. Once you've done that, you go into edit mode on our emoji. Let's go to face select mode, and we are going to select the faces in front of the mouth and make sure you didn't select anything behind it, which is pretty easy to do. So I'll just unselect that. And now we're gonna inset. It's adding in faces in the middle. We can turn that off by turning boundary off. And now you can see it's basically adding an edge loop around where our mouth is gonna be. And let's bring that down a little more. And now you could just hit X, delete faces. And now we have the basic hole for our mouth. Now we go into vertex select mode, and we're just going to kind of push these around and just move these around to the border of our mouth. Oh, and actually, if on the middle area, if you see that the vertices are separating, to stop that, let's go to our mirror modifier and hit clipping. That way it'll kind of lock the middle vertices together so that we don't accidentally separate them. So we're going to move both of these down. We're just going to bring that closer to the actual shape of the mouth. And you might just need to play with it a little bit to get it to line up. And you could already see we pretty much have our mouth finished. You can apply the mirror modifier. That way we'll be able to edit both sides again. And the next thing we're going to do is, let's do the big eye next. So go into face select, and we'll just select these 4 front faces where the eye will be. And we're going to kind of do a similar thing where we're going to inset that to get a new edge loop around where that eye will be. But since this eye is so giant, we're going to need to move some stuff around to give us some space to work. Now that we've added that, let's just delete those faces. Go into vertex select mode, and let's start moving some of these vertices around to give us some more space so we actually have enough room to create our eye. And if you need to go into solid view to see what you're doing, sometimes it's hard to know when you're selecting a front or a back vertex. So, and just remember, you can hit 1, 2, and 3 to select vertex, edge, or face select mode in edit mode. Once we've made some space, let's select our eye edge loop and go into edit. If you hit N on your keyboard and bring out this side tab of this loop tools, I'm not sure, this might be, I know this is included with Blender, but you might need to turn it on in the add-ons. But basically with your eye edge loop selected, you can hit circle and that'll automatically round out those vertices. And now we're just gonna scale that up and basically bring it about to the shape of our eye hole. And you could see some of these are a little stretched, so we will be moving those around in a second, but we'll do the other eye first. So now let's go ahead and just do this other eye real quick. Make sure we don't have any back faces selected. And we'll do the same thing, just inset with eye, and we can delete those faces as well. And now let's just make some space again to move our eye around. Since this one's a lot smaller, it's actually much easier to fit in. We might just need to move this one a little bit. Everything else is pretty much out of the way already. So select that edge loop and we'll do the same thing. Just select circle in the loop tools. Scale that down a little bit. And let's just move that over the eye hole. And now let's just bring this vertex down to kind of even out the spacing between that. Just gonna kind of move some of these around so they're not so stretched. All right, and we pretty much already have the shape of our emoji face now. So let's turn on a matte cap in the viewport. And let's choose a reflective one and then turn off our shape sphere. And that doesn't do enough, so we're actually also gonna have to turn off our in front in the viewport display. And let's just make sure we're not seeing any bumps in our geometry, maybe even something like this. It's actually looking pretty good. If you do see some like flat areas or something that isn't snapping properly. So let's turn on our shape sphere again. And now if you select a vertice, it will snap to the surface of that shape. So you could see, even though I'm not even really moving these vertices, it is moving closer to the shape of the sphere underneath. And once we're done with the general shape of our face, the next thing we're gonna do is I will apply this with 1 level. And now let's turn off all that and we'll be able to look at that. And you could see even with the shrink wrap on, we could see the geometry isn't actually where the shrink wrap says it is. That is because I didn't snap these vertices in edit mode, but the shrink wrap modifier snaps it for us. But sometimes it doesn't always work perfectly, so we can select some of these vertices. We'll need to turn on our shape sphere and just make sure that is snapping into place. And then I am going to, the reason I applied that subdivision surface modifier is just to give it even more geometry to snap to the shape sphere surface, because the original geometry was so low resolution that it was still sometimes going to be flat. So this will just help round out our sphere even more. And now I'm going to add even one more subdivision surface just to make sure we have plenty of resolution. The next thing I'm going to do is add a solidify modifier. I'll change to like a slightly different matte cap just to see it a little easier. And I would say this is up to you how thick you want it. Now that we have our solidify modifier, let's go ahead and add in the eyeballs real quick. So I'll do the big eye first. I just select the outer edge loop of the eye. I'm gonna hit Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I'll bring in an icosphere. I'm gonna turn that up to level 3, shade smooth. I'll probably even add a subdivision surface modifier to that. And then I'll just scale it down until it kind of fits in our eye hole. And let's go ahead and just so we could see better in like rendered view, let's add in a environment texture real quick. Since I'm making a shiny emoji, I'm using something with like a lot of bright lights up above. So with that environment lighting, the one I use is pretty dark, so I usually have to crank it up to like 10 or 12. I haven't set any materials yet, so I'm not actually getting any reflections, but at least I can see how the eye is fitting into our face. I'm gonna just scale it up a little more. And then I will do the same thing with the other eye hole. So I'll select the edge ring, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I'll just bring in another icosphere, level 3, scale that down till it fits. And let's just set up the camera real quick while we're at it. So hit Control Alt 0 to bring it to the front. I'm gonna change it to a square perspective. And I'm just gonna zero out the location of the camera. And I'm gonna change it to an isometric camera. And then we could just adjust the scale of the orthographic view. I ended up rendering this in cycles for my final version. You don't have to do that. You could definitely do it in Eevee, but there's so many different settings you have to tweak, like the reflections and the ambient occlusion and all this stuff. I'm kind of lazy, and my graphics card is good enough that I could just use cycles at a, this is such a simple scene. You could render it at a pretty low sample number and then just use the denoiser to get a good image. So that's kind of what I opted for. And I might even just turn on transparent under film so we don't get that background, just so I could see it a little better. You could still kind of see a gap in my bigger eye, so I'm just gonna scale that up a little more. But yeah, that's getting there already. We just need to add some pupils, teeth, and the tongue. So with our big eye selected, let's, in edit mode, Shift D, let's turn off snapping for now, and then scale that down. Go to wireframe view, just kind of line up our pupil with the pupil and the emoji. I'm going to scale that along the Y by 0.5. And then I'm just going to kind of rotate this so it'll fit on the exterior and it looks like it kind of lines up properly. And yeah, that's pretty good already. So we'll do the same thing for this eye. I'm going to make this one a little smaller. Cool, so we're already getting our basic shape. So now the teeth and the tongue are both pretty easy. For the teeth, let's just go into wireframe view with vertex selection mode. Let's just grab basically this top row of vertices for the mouth, which is kind of hard to see. Make sure you probably selected the ones in the back too, so let's just unselect those. And now let's Shift D to duplicate that top row, and then hit P and separate by selection. We go into the outliner up here and select this emoji 001. That'll be the duplicate we just made. Rename that to teeth. Since this still has the shrink wrap modifier on, we'll have to turn on our shape sphere. I'm just gonna, in edit mode, just extrude those down to the size of the teeth, and then we could scale it down a little bit like that. Let's take these two bottom ones and just move those up so they're kind of rounded out. And maybe I'll add one more, like basically support loop at the top and bottom. Let's shade smooth for the teeth. And then we can just go into the modifier panel and apply the shrink wrap modifier. And then let's just move that back on the Y a little bit so it's deeper into the mouth, and turn off our shape sphere. And now we have our teeth as well. So the last thing will be our tongue. But before we do that, I want to bring this back to the basically correct shape. So you could actually just, so yeah, I'm gonna rotate our emoji reference back to the normal. Actually, let's just do that with everything. So let's just select our entire face and rotate that back. And now we'll just add in the tongue. So make sure your 3D cursor is back into the center of the scene. So you can just hit Shift S and then cursor to world origin if it is when we moved it for one of the eyes. Then bring in plane, and let's just move that to the top of the tongue, and we will bring that forward basically so it's sticking almost out of the mouth. And then we will grab the front two vertices and just extrude those down, and we just bring those down in front view until we reach the bottom of the tongue. And then we can just adjust the placement of this, maybe move it back a little so it's not intersecting with the teeth. And now in edit mode with that selected, we can just inset and hit B to turn boundary on again, because otherwise it won't let us inset this. Now we'll just kind of in vertex select mode, let's add a single edge loop in the middle of this, and then we'll select these two, bring that up, maybe bring it in a little bit. Let's add in a subdivision surface. You can hit Control 2 just to round that out. I'll bring those, actually, yeah, we'll bring those down, scale those back up on the X, and then we'll probably have to scale the entire tongue up on the X. Let's bring that down a little more. You can see it's intersecting right now. What I'm gonna do is just select this edge up here and hit Control B to bevel that. Give us a nice bend in the tongue. So the last thing I will do for the tongue is I will just select this middle edge loop, hit Control B to bevel that out, and then I will just select that middle one again, deselect that, and basically I'm just gonna bring that down and over to the right a little bit just to create a divot in there. Let's shade smooth. And then I'll do the same thing I did with the teeth and the body, or the head. I will just add a solidify, make that thick enough, and I might turn that up, smooth it out a little more. This bottom, I might round that out. Cool, and yeah, I'll like move these teeth up a little bit, maybe rotate those, turn off our reference. And there we go, we already have our face. So I'm gonna really quickly go over the materials. So let's just go to the shading tab, and we can even turn on our scene world so we could kind of see how it's gonna be affected in our final render. Let's hide our camera for now. So with our head selected, we just name these. I'm just gonna call this yellow. So for this, I have the hex values. So it's gonna be F7C634. And for the roughness, I'm gonna turn this down to 0.05. I'm gonna duplicate this. I'm gonna make an orange color for this second color. So C0570F. And then I'm going to bring in a mix shader node. And the last bit is I'll bring in a layer weight. We'll just keep this at 0.5, and I'll choose the facing value. And now basically just on the outer edges of our emoji, we will have that orange shading. If you look at the actual emoji, you can see it's kind of yellow in the middle and then orange on the edges. So that is why I want that orange on the outside. For the tongue, I'm gonna do something similar. So I'll do one shade of pink for this. So this will be F74A93. I'm gonna turn this up to like 0.75 for the specular. And then I will duplicate that. And the second one will be a darker pink. So this will be BE1C5A, and same deal, mix shader. Another layer weight node. This time it's going to be 0.9. Choose the facing again. There we go. But since it's a tongue, I want to have some bump to it. So I'm going to bring in a noise texture. And if you have the Node Wrangler add-ons installed, you could hit Control T to bring in the mapping and the texture coordinate nodes. I'm going to change the scale to 8, detail to 16. You could actually hit Control Shift and then click to see it in the rendered view. For roughness, I'm going to do 0.85. And then I'm going to bring in a color ramp, kind of just adjust the contrast on this. And I'm going to plug that into the roughness on both of these shaders. So let's take a look at that. Good. So now that is giving us some variation on the roughness for the tongue. The other thing I want to do is adjust the bump. So I'm going to duplicate this color ramp and we'll do that. I'm going to probably bring out the edges a little so it's not quite as contrasty. Then I'll bring in a vector bump node. We'll plug the color into the height and I'll make this a 0.2 for strength. And we're going to plug that into the normal for both of these shaders. Go back to here and now you can see we have some bump on the tongue. Check that out in Cycles rendered view. Cool. And the eyes are a really simple shader. Basically, I just make it pure white for the eye. I turned up the specular to 0.8. Roughness can be a 0.1. And I'll do that. I'll set this eye to that as well. And then we're going to have to add in a second material for the pupil. And that's just going to be a pure black. And for roughness, I'll make that like a 0.25. It's not going to be quite as reflective. And now with our pupil selected, you could hit assign. And we'll do that for this eye as well. Add in a second material, select the pupil, and then hit assign. And the last one's going to be our teeth. So let's remove that, create a new one, teeth, and that will just also be pure white. And let's do like a 0.1 for that. It's probably the same as the eye, honestly. And that is the materials. I'm also just going to rotate that just so we get some variation on the lighting. And now you saw in my final render, it was kind of an animation, just like a goofy circular animation. That's actually really easy to do. First, select our head mesh. We'll bring in an empty, a new empty, and I'm going to rename it camera pointer. We'll need that in a second. Next, I will select my camera, Shift S, cursor to selected. Let's bring in a curve circle, rotate that on the X by 90, hit Control A, apply rotation. And now we're going to select our camera and move it along the X so it's basically on the outside of the circle. And then with our camera selected, hit Shift and click on the curve and hit Control P, follow path. And you'll see at first it's just definitely not what we want. Honestly, you could do something goofy where it's like going in a circle, but that's not what I wanted. So we're going to do two things. We're going to, with the camera selected, go to Constraints tab. I'm going to add a limit rotation. Let's really quick bring this down to 60 for the timeline. And also for the path, you go to the curve option, path animation. I'm going to bring the frames down to 60 as well, so it's just like a looping animation. And now select the camera. I'm going to limit the Y. We're almost there. The last thing we need is a track 2 constraint, and let's just select our camera pointer. And now we're just always going to be pointed at the center of our face. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. The last thing I did was just added in a background plane. Make it big enough so that it will always be covering the background. The further it is away, like the crazier the movement will be. So I'm just going to actually bring it a bit closer. And the last thing I did was bring in a spotlight, point that at the plane. Just going to bring it behind our emoji. And then I will bring up the size so it's pretty much encompassing our entire plane. Turn the blend to 1. I will add a really quick blue material. Picked a shade of blue that I liked. Turn up the roughness to 1 and the specular to 0. Let's go into rendered mode. And then I'm just gonna crank up the power of the lamp until you could kind of see a gradient light. Say like 1500 is probably good. And I'm gonna turn up the color management up to high contrast. And there we go. That is our basic animation and face. So I'm just gonna render this out real quick and I'll see you in a second. And one last comment, just make sure to turn off your reference empty in render view and also your shape sphere. Because if you accidentally leave it on in the render view, it would just have a sphere basically closing up the mouth and it would look not good. So just make sure to turn those off before you render it out. All right, see you in a second. All right, and that is our final render. Really, that's it. It is pretty simple to model an emoji face. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more tutorials like this. Comment below if you have any other ideas you'd like to see in terms of either modeling tutorials or more animation tutorials. You can check me out on Instagram at thomaslatvies3D. And also, if you are looking for other ways to support me, consider checking out my Patreon, which is patreon.com/BlenderTutor. Depending on the membership level you choose, you can get access to free downloads of 4K phone wallpapers, Patreon shoutouts in my YouTube channel, and access to the project files from these tutorials. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.